Shadow Minister Andrew Rosindell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I firstly begin by extending my thanks to the honourable gentleman, the member for Strangford, for securing this important debate here this afternoon. He is a tireless defender of human rights, and his dedication to the cause of those who are persecuted for their beliefs, wherever they may be, is courageous, admirable and much needed, and I thank him for it. And I would also like to thank the Backbench Business Committee for enabling this discussion to take place this afternoon. It's a vital debate that we should be having. It's only a shame there aren't more honourable members here this afternoon to take part in these discussions. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, this country, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, has long been a sanctuary for the oppressed, and this chamber a voice for the voiceless and a champion of liberty. From the days of William Wilberforce to the last government's establishment of a special envoy for freedom of religion and belief, this House of Commons has stood up for the fundamental freedoms of speech, conscience and belief, and long may that continue. And so today I wish to speak for those who cannot speak freely themselves, those who languish in prison cells, not for any crime, but simply for having the courage to believe differently, to respectfully challenge authority, or to follow their conscience in the face of tyranny. Now, today, Madam Deputy Speaker, we've had a short debate, but a very meaningful one, with some excellent contributions from colleagues on all sides of the House. So the Honourable Member for Strangford, who spoke passionately, as he always does, told us about the importance of defending those who profess their faith and upholding their convictions, and also the importance of standing up for freedom. And that's something that has always inspired me in politics, the love of freedom. And I grew up in the 1980s when we had a Prime Minister who defended freedom around the world. Margaret Thatcher stood up against totalitarianism and communism across the world, and particularly in those days against the Soviet Union. And it is our belief on this side of the House in freedom and liberty that I believe drives us. Love of country is part of that, being a nation that has always stood up for the liberties and freedoms of the people of these islands. She's left her place, Madam Deputy Speaker, but I have great admiration for the member for Ealing Acton, and I work closely with her on the issue of Armenia, and we recall the Armenian genocide 110 years ago, and she referred to her constituent Anat Moskvin, who I also know very well. We worked together on upholding the freedom of the people of Armenia, and it has been referred to, the Honourable Lady, about the prisoners that are kept in Azerbaijani jails and how they also need to have their freedom, and Armenia needs to live as an independent free democracy without fear, and the people must be allowed to express their views freely. And I attended a wreath laying at the Cenotaph only last week with the Honourable Member and others cross-party in support of our friends from Armenia, a Christian country that simply wants to be democratic and independent and not be threatened by an aggressive neighbour. No one in this House could ever compete with the passion and the belief and the deeply held views of the Right Honourable Member for New Forest West, who sits behind me now, someone I've admired ever since I entered this House in 2001. He speaks with enormous passion, and he understands that this country is a Christian country, and our laws and our traditions and our customs are founded on those Christian traditions. And if we discard them, we discard everything we have in this country. It doesn't mean we don't respect other religions, but our Christian heritage is fundamental. And it is our Christian heritage that leads Britain to be a champion of freedom, free speech, freedom of religion and democracy around the world, which we have been far longer than most other countries in the world today. And he reminded us, quite rightly, of how our own Royal Navy eroded the slave trade. It's often forgotten it was Britain that led the way against the slave trade, but he rightly reminded us of that today. And I thank him for everything he does to stand up for the rights of the oppressed, and particularly those religious minorities that are denied the right to worship and practice freely. And the member for Lewis, the spokesman for the Liberal Democrats, who I thought spoke extremely well and raised a lot of issues which I think would be common throughout this House. Particularly, he spoke about the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, the importance of the China audit, which I believe we're still waiting for, and it's very important we get on with that. But the moral duty to stand up for those who have lost their freedom, and Britain has a proud record of this, and I think that transcends party politics, and I'm sure in this House it will do again today. And he also mentioned those of the Baha'i faith who are persecuted, and that's another very important point. And superb interventions from my honourable friend, the member for Broadland and Fakenham, who's now left his place. But he spoke about, rightly so, the balance between dealing with nations around the world. We want good relations, we want trade and cooperation, and economically we want to work with many countries, but equally so, we need to think about the human rights. We need to balance those things. And equally so, he spoke about imposing our values on other countries, which is always a balance. We can't impose British values on every country of different traditions and religions, but nevertheless, we should never be silent when we see an injustice. And I know that certainly on this side of the House, and I'm sure on the government side as well, standing up for injustice, wherever it may be in the world, is something that we all stand for as people that believe in freedom and democracy. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to rightly focus on those that members have mentioned today who are detained in prisons wrongly for their religion or belief. So what practical steps is His Majesty's government taking to monitor, identify and support such individuals? The Minister will need to tell us very clearly today, and she has lots of time to answer all these questions, what resources are being allocated by the FCDO to monitor prisoners of conscience globally. And how is this information being used in the UK's broader human rights strategy? And as a member of the Article 18 Alliance, will the Minister tell us if the UK actively propose names for international advocacy? And, as we have already heard, the statistics are deeply alarming. According to the US Commission on International Religious Freedom, more than 1,300 individuals are currently imprisoned for their beliefs in just 28 countries. And that includes 532 people in communist China, 327 people in Putin's Russia, and 87 people in Iran. And other members today have mentioned other countries where there are similar issues that need to be addressed. Vietnam and North Korea were mentioned. Member for Ealing-Acton mentioned Azerbaijan and Armenia, which I referred to earlier. Member for New Forest West quite rightly mentioned Venezuela. I met a delegation from Venezuela only last week, and in fact I was an observer at a Venezuelan election some years ago. It wasn't very democratic, I have to say, and I don't think much has changed since. In fact, it's got a lot worse. So that is a country we should absolutely be highlighting as one in need of radical democratic change. And he also mentioned Egypt and Turkey. There are many others we could think of today. But the point being, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that Britain must lead the way. We are the nation that always stands up for the rights and freedoms of peoples, and we must do so today with vigour and without compromise. And so, will the Minister confirm whether the government has raised specific cases with these governments and others, and if so, will she tell us which ones she has been speaking to in recent days? I'm aware, Madam Deputy Speaker, that this debate is centred on matters of faith. However, I, along with the member for Strangford, want to take the opportunity to raise the case of Apple News founder Jimmy Lai. We need to see Jimmy Lai released, an end to his politically motivated trial, and the repeal of the draconian national security law in Hong Kong. It is one matter to speak in this place regarding individuals far afield who have little to no connection with these islands, but it is another when the matter involves a British national. So, what developments have there been on this so far? We talk a lot about this, but we see very little action. So, given the government looks as though it seems to become more economically aligned to China, which I personally think is a huge error, will Jimmy Lai's case be front and centre in our engagements with Beijing? And has she specifically called for Jimmy Lai's release with her Chinese counterparts? Madam Deputy Speaker, I would also like to commend the All-Party Parliamentary Group for International Freedom of Religion or Belief, and in particular, as I've already said, the tireless efforts of the Honourable Member for Strangford and all members of that group for their laudable initiative in launching a scheme that enables members of this House to advocate for individual prisoners of conscience. This initiative represents a meaningful and compassionate step towards amplifying the voices of those who have been unjustly detained for exercising their fundamental rights. In light of this important work, I must ask the Minister whether the FCDO is actively supporting this endeavour by assisting members in establishing contact with relevant embassies here in the United Kingdom, as well as engaging with international, legal and diplomatic mechanisms to strengthen advocacy on behalf of these individuals. I am pleased that the government heeded the call on this side of the House in renewing the last government's position in having a special envoy for freedom of belief and religion. However, can the Minister outline exactly what the special envoy is doing to advance the cause of individual prisoners of conscience? And has the envoy engaged directly with foreign governments or institutions to press for their release? And does the government intend to enshrine the post in law, just as my good friend, the former member for Congleton, Fiona Bruce, passionately campaigned for when she served in this House only up until last year? And also, Madam Deputy Speaker, may I say that Britain has long used both aid and diplomacy to promote our values abroad. In this context, may I ask the Minister whether the allocation of UK aid to recipient countries is ever made conditional upon demonstrable progress in safeguarding freedom of religion and belief. Specifically, is consideration given to the treatment of individuals who are imprisoned solely on account of their religious convictions? And is our financial assistance ever leveraged to encourage reform and accountability in such cases? Those in prison today for their beliefs, be they Christian, Ahmadi Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, Buddhist, or any other religion, or members of minority or non-religious communities, deserve more than just our concern. They deserve our advocacy, our voice, and our unwavering defence. Madam Deputy Speaker, our foreign policy must reflect not only our national interests, but a projection of how we treat our own people. We must never shy away from calling out the wickedness and unjust imprisonment, or from defending the right to freedom of conscience. As the great John Stuart Mill, once a member of this House, so wisely said, bad men need nothing more to compass their ends than that good men should look on and do nothing. We look forward to this government doing something.